Hello, and welcome to the Light Reading Podcast. I'm Phil Harvey. I'm an editor here at Light Reading.
I'm Kelsey Zeiser. I'm also an editor at Light Reading.
And I'm Phil McKinney, the president and CEO of CableLabs.
Phil McKinney, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, glad to be here.
Boy, Kelsey, do we ever get big guests like this? It's like once a year, maybe twice a year.
And now we've got Phil squared.
That's right. We got two. I mean, you can't go wrong having more Phils on the podcast. It's easier for me. I'm not going to totally mispronounce his name except like twice. That's going to be it.
Fills up the time faster.
Okay, now here we are wasting his time. So first we're thrilled to have him on, and now we're just wasting his time. We have to ask about 10G because CableLabs, one of its big initiatives is 10G, and since we're in 2022 now, and since the DOCSIS specs are done, and there's some interoperability going on, what are the sort of top 10G related goals that you have for this year?
Well, as we've talked about 10G, we talk about also being multiple years, right? We launched it in January of 19 at CES. We've met all of our milestones. We're actually ahead of plan for what we laid out then. Continue to push the curve on capacity of the network. You talked a little bit about the DOCSIS spec. That's DOCSIS 4.0, and now it's a number of the members have done lab trials, and now in the early stages of vendor readiness. So that's making all good progress. But the path to the ultimate vision for 10G, 10 gigabits and beyond is a long road, right? We're talking multi-gigabit symmetricals coming soon, and then getting into the higher speeds. But again, 10G is not just about DOCSIS. We also have a lot of work going on in fiber. And then there's other elements: low latency, improved security, improved privacy. And all of those elements, we made great progress in 21. 22, a lot of it is focused on the next step of speed and performance.
Yeah, it's always I know it's we're talking about a big kind of platform approach. I know it has multiple angles to it, and DOCSIS 4 just sort of seemed like a good milestone marker for where the platform is in the space. But yeah, 10 gigabit symmetrical sounds. Boy, I would love that. That would be great.
Well, actually, on fiber, there are places around the world you can get 10 gig today symmetrical on fiber. So there's some early live commercial deployments on the fiber side that are showing some great progress. But part of the challenge on fiber is everybody's gone fiber, right? With the RDOF dollars here in the United States, with government funding. Fiber does have a ceiling, and a lot of people don't realize that. They think, fiber's just, has no limit. But once you get north of about 40 to 50 gig on single strand fiber, you've kind of hit the ceiling. The work at CableLabs on our fiber work is how do you get to terabits and multiple terabits on single strand fiber? Because one thing you learn in the network game is there is no ceiling. We have a hard time thinking about what are people going to do with 1 gig. Now you start thinking about what are people going to do with 1 terabit? What are they going to do with 50 terabit? Someone will figure it out. Some innovator out there will figure out how to use whatever gets built.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I know you guys also launched a 10G challenge last fall. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is? And it looks like there's some cash prizes.
Hard, cold cash. Yeah, the 10G challenge is really to address this question about what are innovators going to create to take advantage of the network. So to kind of encourage those innovators, we've done a couple things. One, if you recall back, starting in 2017, 18, we released the Near Future films, which were a series of 4 films that looked at what is the future of the home going to be like? What's the future of aging in place? What's the future of schools going to look like? What is the future of work going to look like? Based on the models of those 4 films, we're saying we kind of put out there a vision. Then we announced the 10G program. we want to encourage innovators to think about what could they invent, what could they create to take advantage of these networks. So we launched the 10G challenge. We announced it at Tech Expo this last October. There is cash prize. So for each of the 4 categories of live, learn, work, play, there is a prize for the best idea, and that's upwards of $50,000 for the
Whoa.
best idea. Then there's an overall winner, which is $100,000, and those are non-dilutive grants, meaning it's not we're not doing it for equity of a startup and any of those kinds of things. It's basically to provide funding or cash to the winners for those that present the best ideas of what you could do around play, such as gaming or entertainment or new kinds of content coming down the network, or learning. What's the future of education? What could you do in the classroom with
Right.
gigabit kinds of speeds?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think uh, I think that's what we were all kind of wondering, in conjunction with the contest, is like when you hear about
Mhm.
the vision for 10G, you sort of think about, okay, well, what kind of apps and services are going to actually need that, and not, maybe not just the speed, but actually in particular the latency, the low latency that's sort of envisioned,
Mhm.
because you mentioned that's also a part that kind of goes in lockstep with the improved speed and the enhanced security, is that lower latency network. Um, can you give us an idea of like some of the things that have been bandied about, or some of the applications that are in the works now? Without spoiling the contest.
Well, actually, we could use it just as a tickler to get people to think about it.
Hmm.
And yes, we already have submissions for the contest, and some of them are actually quite interesting. But with regards specifically to the low latency, which becomes almost foundational to any network of the future. And in fact, when you think about it from a user's experience, we think about speed as being the most important thing. It's not. Actually, what users will notice right off the bat is the latency. Latency is now kind of bubbled up to being the thing that users will notice right away. If they're on a laggy network, they could have excess capacity in the network. But if that latency is not down below what we refer to as human perception, people notice it. It's the measurement that people are most apt to jump on and comment on. And in CableLabs, we've announced low latency DOCSIS, we've released low latency Wi-Fi, and these are all element pieces to deliver this end-to-end low latency experience. But some of the applications that require low latency, one is gaming. It's The gaming industry has been all over this, and in fact, we've been working with some of the biggest game publishers out there to have them be prepared and understand how it works and how to take
Hmm.
advantage of it within their gameplay, etc. There's a lot of buzz in the marketplace right now on the metaverse. If you're going to come into a virtual world and collaborate, your ability to collaborate is really dictated by that latency. We're here, doing this conversation today on a very good network, and can have a back and forth conversation. As soon as any latency gets injected into any form of two-way communication, I refer to it as people going into lean back mode. They're not
Hmm.
engaged in the conversation. They're going to lean back and wait for a pause before jumping in to have a conversation. And it changes the entire dynamic. So for the metaverse to really come into its own and really be as dominant as some people are predicting it will be, low latency is absolutely the minimal requirement for that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
By the way, we'll mark you down on the bingo card. We're
Got to play the
metaverse was
buzzword bingo.
Yeah.
one of our keywords for the year.
I got low latency and I got metaverse. Let's see what else
Yeah,
is left.
on the metaverse thing, is there anything Cable Labs is specifically doing, to kind of I don't know, take part in the hype around the metaverse, or sort of get in the game in terms of just using that occasion to increase awareness of some of the technical work that it's doing?
Yeah, I mean, CableLabs were known as really on the access network side, but what a
Mm,
lot of people don't know about us is the research we do on the stack that sits on top of the network. We need to understand what experiences are going to be created so that we can architect networks to support those experiences. So I think I'm going to go think it was like 2016, 2017, maybe we had the Cable Labs board of directors meeting. The May board meeting is always in Colorado at our headquarters. And we actually built a collaborative metaverse for the CEOs to experience in 2017. So we actually had people who were remote. One was in Boston. One of the researchers was in Boston. They were someplace else. And everybody at that time was wearing the big goggles and in order to create so that the CEOs could sense what the future is coming. Since then, we've continued to invest. We have a research program around what we call immersive media, looking at really not so much the content creation side, because that's being done by companies like Lytro and et cetera, or the displays like Lightfields, and others, but more about how does that content get moved around on the network. So Cable Labs and a couple of people in Hollywood, along with some others, created a new organization called Ideas, and it really is around this immersive experience to create the standards so that when content is being moved back and forth in the metaverse, or if you're doing new kinds of storytelling in the metaverse, how does that content get distributed in the network? How do you do that as most effectively and efficiently as possible? So, a lot of people would not put Cable Labs or even the cable industry as a thought leader in this space, but actually, we collectively as an industry have been in this space for quite some time and have played and continue to play a pretty strong leadership role, stitching together all the other elements that are coming together. Because if they don't play well together, if they don't interrupt together, the metaverse will just never exist. Proprietary solutions are not the path to success in this game.
yeah, that makes sense. Especially in light of the experience that everybody's craving, which like what it's probably going to start out as is, I guess, small experiences and fixed locations and that sort of thing. But for it to really take off, like you said, that interoperability has to be there, and that's going to take a lot more work than just one company can do by itself.
Well, and I think the companies have figured out that they can't go it alone, right? This is a big lift. Whether it's Microsoft or Facebook or excuse me, Meta, um, it is. They all recognize that this is going to require a broad play. One is just the sheer amount of data. If you think about, for instance, if you're doing our true what we refer to as volumetric holographic kinds of experiences where the person looks and feels 3D, you're pushing a lot of pixels to convey that experience, which means you need big pipes, you need big networks, you need low
Yeah.
latency, you need display technologies, you need camera technologies to capture that image in order to recreate that in a digital world. There's a lot of players all being supplied by different parts. No one company is in a position, one, to either even have the expertise, two, much less stitch it all together to make it work.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
Go ahead,
you
Kelsey.
were
We got some
Yeah,
questions.
you were touching on earlier about the importance of addressing latency and the customer experience, and I saw that in the fall you all announced adaptive route control. Can you talk a little bit about what that is, and does that also help kind of improve the network experience?
Yeah, so adaptive route control, or what we call ARC, project at Cable Labs, is really around the challenge, not so much of the low latency piece, but just the overall connected experience, right? How many times have you been on your mobile phone where, um, your cellular network is really lagging, or the internet connectivity to a Wi-Fi, you're someplace where the Wi-Fi all of a sudden goes out, and the phones and in your devices don't work very well at being able to switch back and forth. So ARC
Yeah.
actually looks at a couple different things. One is it's constantly monitoring the networks and can literally switch such that you do not lose any sessions or any experiences. And you can also program it to look at certain types of packets. Where do you want to send them? If something is more time sensitive, put that on the faster network. Things that are less time sensitive, you can put it onto maybe the slower network, or always stitch a certain software experience or data onto a certain network. So it allows for a level of experience that is pretty shockingly better than what we all have today walking around with our devices. And in fact, the joke at CableLabs is everybody wants to be the beta tester for ARC on their phones, because it solves the issue of your internet is really laggy. So what do? You go turn Wi-Fi off, right? But
Right.
you got to be the
Yeah.
one to go turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Is basically your digital finger that's constantly watching the network
Okay.
and just constantly moving your packets to maintain the best possible experience given wherever you're standing. So yes, ARC is a technology, albeit today it's primarily, think of it as a mobile phone type of experience. But it isn't restricted to that. Anytime you have multiple network options on wherever you're at, ARC has that ability to be able to direct and maximize the experience, taking advantage of the best of all the assets it has available to it. If it's got cellular, Wi-Fi, fiber, and an HFC network, it can manage all of that to give you the best experience and do it without you needing to even know that it's there.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's definitely
great piece of technology.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue too, because it's like the more stuff we load up on our phones, the more chatty they are with the network and moving data back and forth and that sort of thing.
Well, and it is because bandwidth now has become so prolific.
Mhm.
Application providers have gotten a little sloppy. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of chatter and a lot of data going across the network that a lot of users just aren't even aware of, which ties then also back to things on like privacy, right? There, personal information leakage that
Mhm.
occurs in the applications that go across the network is a big problem. And there's been some companies, some phone manufacturers and others that are attacking, trying to attack that problem by being as transparent as possible. But with lots of bandwidth, people just get sloppy and
Yeah.
assume they can just send everything, and sends everything sometimes.
Yeah, I know. The times I get asked, I'm an iPhone user, and the times I get asked, it's like, does this app need to have your location or whatever? And I'm like, why?
No.
I'm just ordering muffins.
Yeah.
It's like, or whatever. It's like they're always asking me. The weirdest applications are asking for things like camera access and my personal location, and I'm just like, what do they need that for? It's like
Right.
sometimes it's kind of
Well,
off-putting, but
Like, can we
interesting.
well,
have
and I
it?
do, and I do give like Apple deserves credit with the how hard they've come down on forcing the application providers to be transparent with the users.
Yeah,
Right. So rather than just being sneaky,
yeah,
it has to be explicit. Do you want to grant this application access to your camera, to your microphone, to your location
yeah,
all the time, or only when you're using the app?
yeah.
Right. And I think it's shocking when it first got turned on, how many people were surprised on how
Oh
many
yeah.
applications and what each of these applications were using, to where now I think everybody's just like default no. You know,
That's right.
just automatically default no on everything. Don't,
I do that all the time, and then sometimes I'm like, oh, I guess it does actually need to know my
Yeah,
Yeah,
location.
but here, okay, but here's the question, Goals. I don't know about you, but in my case, it's more of I default no until it proves that it needs it.
right.
Yes.
Then
Yeah,
I turn it
exactly.
on,
Yep.
right?
Yeah,
Because I'd much rather swing to because we've all had that freaky experience. My wife and I went to a movie. We came out of the movie and there was one of those big cardboard cutouts, and you're standing there in front of the movie and you're going, oh, this is a movie I want to go see, right? We're standing there talking about it. Then we go out into the car. My wife pulls up her phone, and what's the next ad?
For the
For
movie.
that movie.
Yeah.
Right? And everybody goes, oh my God, they're listening on the microphone. Well, they're not really listening to the microphones. But my wife had location tracking turned on. She has an Android, right? And they knew that she was in a movie. She knew where they were literally standing. They actually have the map of the floor of the movie theater. So they know what poster you're standing in front of so that they can push that ad to remind you of that movie that you hesitated. You stood there for 15 seconds. You must be interested in that poster. You must be interested in that movie. The sophistication for the ad model has gotten crazy.
Yeah.
It's frightening.
Well, it definitely knows what part of 7-Eleven I'm always standing next to the beer cooler, apparently, according to my thing. It's like they send me in for milk. I never end up there. I'm always getting the ads for something else.
You want an IPA, don't you?
That's right.
For me, it's the Three Musketeers. I can't pass the Three Musketeers.
Delicious beer that tastes like grass clippings. It's all good. Let's see. One more question, if you have a moment, and then we'll leave you alone. I wanted to ask about the fixed wireless specs. The acronym was FARMSIS, and I'm still not exactly sure if that was a direct acronym or kind of an amalgamation.
Or maybe Farm Kiss?
It might not. It wasn't that. But it was a fixed wireless access for rural areas, and it was using DOCSIS and coax infrastructure. I'm curious. So I guess maybe I've answered my own question, but how does that differ from the kind of the traditional approaches for fixed wireless access that we're seeing rolled out in the market, and where is that going, or where is CableLabs hoping to see that in the market?
Yeah, so FARMSIS, the name actually came up more as a little bit of a joke. The researcher who came up with the project, Daryl Malice, grew up rural, right? His father and uncles all farmed or whatever. So think of it as DOCSIS for farms. FARMSIS is where the name came from. But the research objective is if you sit back and you think about networks, right? So if you think about the cable network, the fiber networks in rural America, but it also applies in other parts of the world. What you tend to find is that there's networks running right down the poles, aerial plant, that are connecting two cities. Well, everybody who lives within a certain distance of that road, though, doesn't have broadband. The cities have the broadband, but the cost to do drops off that pole to then have to go, 2, 3, 4, 5 kilometers trenching in order to get it to a house, really, really expensive. Labor's the expensive element to that. So is there an alternative way to get that service, which I can look out my front window and I can see that telephone pole, but I can't get it to the house? So it is a fixed wireless solution. What is unique about it, though, is that the spectrum and the approach we use to send the signal allows us to deliver good speeds. But it also allows for all existing DOCSIS CPE gear to work in the home unmodified. So DOCSIS modems, set-top boxes,
all
gateways,
the compatibility just translates.
Right. So the compatibility with the entire DOCSIS infrastructure allows you to use DOCSIS CPE gear in a FARMSIS deployment. That's unique from, let's say, white space or millimeter wave or any of these others where you have to do full end-to-end proprietary for the solution that's involved. And this basically takes DOCSIS right off the pole, whether it's HFC or fiber, wirelessly delivers it. Home has a little antenna, picks it up, and then puts it right back into DOCSIS. And therefore, all the DOCSIS CPE gear can run off of that. And again, it's part of CableLabs and our industry's investments in how do you bring broadband to people who just don't have an alternative, the cost to deliver broadband services in the most rural parts of the country. How do you do that? How do you solve that in a cost-effective way, but bring them a service that is as important as broadband is?
Yeah, the compatibility sounds interesting because the last time I tried, and this is dating me a little bit, but the last time I tried a fixed wireless deployment or fixed wireless technology was, I guess it was kind of fixed wireless, was that Clearwire thing that came out a few years ago. And, or Sprint had it.
Yeah, it was WiMAX.
WiMAX, that's what it was.
Based on
And it was
WiMAX.
one of those things where it was like, okay, I was all excited about it. I ordered it, and then they were like, "Oh, okay, but you need this kind of router for your house." I was like, "Okay, cool." "Oh yeah, none of your stuff's going to work. You got to do this kind of thing here." And it was like they kept just replacing gadget by gadget in the house. I know, yeah. It was like eventually I got it to do Wi-Fi, but it was there was the dongles and all the other stuff to get every other device in the house to work. I had to either run it through a thing and translate it, or buy all kinds of gear and stuff like that. Just having stuff compatible right out of the box is way better. A lot more thought on the implementation.
Well, the problem is that, particularly when you're talking about it's an installed base, right? So if you think about Clearwire and WiMAX, people already had stuff in their house. Now they got to come in and replace it all. Yeah. And the installers, the biggest asset that the MSO industry has is the field staff. Right. The people going out there and doing the install. Well, the fact that it's all DOCSIS CPE gear, looks DOCSIS, tastes DOCSIS, smells like DOCSIS, meaning you don't have to retrain your field installers, to do the installs and setups and get homes up and running, et cetera. It has some huge advantage. And does it apply to everywhere rural? No. You got to have plant within a reasonable distance in order for the signals, to go, those types of things. But when you look at particularly those homes that are kind of between I wouldn't call them major rural cities or little towns.
Sure.
You got all that fiber running and you've got HFC plants running between towns, then you've got the ability to kind of start doing a little bit of a fill-in strategy. And when you think about what we call at CableLabs, our project around what we call the digital divide, which is affordability and accessibility. Mm-hmm. This solves the accessibility. Can I get access to broadband, right? And this is just one of many projects that we work on. But to address the accessibility and the affordability piece, it's not going to be one broadband industry provider. Cable can't solve it. Fiber can't solve it all. Satellites are good for some things, other players, fixed wireless, white space, et cetera. It's going to take really an amalgamation of all of the technologies that deliver broadband to solve the digital divide problem.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, we should leave it there for now, in the interest of time and your schedule. And I just don't want to get yelled at. Really, I'm a big chicken. That's mostly my my thing. Anyway, Phil McKinney, thank you so much for being part of this podcast. And please do give us a bit of info about how to find your podcast. Where can we go to find more information about that?
Yeah, so my podcast is called Killer Innovations. We are actually coming up on season 18 here in March. We started in 2005, so it's been going for quite some time. And it's all on innovation, creativity, leadership, all about building the new thing. What's the next thing coming over the horizon, and how can our listeners be thinking in ways to take advantage of the new stuff coming and be successful.
It's a combination of FARMSIS and the metaverse. It'll be Farmiverse. It'll be just where you go into a virtual space, but you can only visit rural areas. That's just a terrible idea.
You have to join at 4 a.m.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Nobody else is using it.
Right.
All right, there we go. Thank you, Mr. McKinney. We will talk to you soon. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.